Okay. I'm Jimmie Hولمان with Pulse Technologies Research and also Bioenergetics and Pulse Technologies. The first being a U.S. corporation, the latter being a European corporation. Both companies are associated closely in the manufacture and research of the capabilities associated with resonant frequency technologies and pulsed frequency technologies. This is actually a relatively new field that has not in the last 100 years been developed to the extent that we've gone into it. Largely it's being used for health reasons and medical purposes. We've been doing this for about 15 years and have made massive amounts of progress in that period of time. We've been looking at the underlying mechanisms which aren't the underlying mechanisms normally. And I'm proud to say we actually have very workable equipment, and I see even greater things to come. My background has always been scientific and oftentimes associated with classified programs. But as a result of that, I was able to associate with a lot of really good people and a lot of pretty exotic science, a lot of which plays into many of the things we're doing today. Those are actually both characteristics of electromagnetic transmissions, but they're also characteristics of other types of more exotic emissions as well. But we utilize those characteristics to couple with and be able to target specific attributes and structures within the body to convey or transfer energy, based largely on much of the work that Tesla tried to do 100 years ago. And I can honestly say that the technology we're literally carrying on some of his work. Depending on the range, it can have very, very good effects or very, very bad effects. We try to work within what we call the therapeutic window, which is ranges that aren't harmful to humans and other living things. Radio waves, gamma rays, even ultraviolet and infrared can be, at the extreme ends, can be very, very harmful to people or any living thing. We stay away from those things and stay within what is known as a therapeutic window. Doing that, those are the energy ranges that the body works in, and we supplement, in many cases, we supplement those things to cause natural processes. There is destructive capabilities also. We utilize that and very specific frequencies to target very specific things. So, but it relies heavily on those knowledge of those wave and frequency and the waveform characteristics to be able to do that sort of manipulation. A lot of it I got in reading documents that I've collected over the last 20 years or so, 20 or more years actually. But then also through actual biological testing. It's very difficult to do that sort of work in the United States, and that's one of the reasons we've done much of the work in Eastern Europe. And we've made connections literally all over the world to be able to have actual laboratory work done. And we're also working closely with many doctors for the validation, where it's actually them who work closely with the clients to see and report the actual results and give them the guidance that is needed. Typically, it's difficult for the end user to know that right off. There are catalogs, both public and private. The public ones have, from my experience, have limited use. You don't know the origins. You don't know, there's so many unknowns about it. From our tests, most of them have very limited use and marginal results. In our case, we've actually used some of those, but we've also used a lot of work from a lot of different sources to come up with much, much better frequencies in much better frequency ranges. And from that, we've seen enormously different and more positive results. Our private protocols are typically distributed through specific distributors and practitioners. In the United States, it's really improper for us to give these. It's not sold with the equipment, but it's usually acquired through one of the legitimate practitioners. That's a great question. The frequency ranges that we use for most of the destructive capabilities, there's basically the stuff falls into two categories. One is destructive and one is constructive or supplemental. All the positive work is done in the constructive and supplemental. Those are the ones that have direct effects on you. When it comes to pathogens that we're targeting for destruction, the frequency ranges that are utilized for destructive purposes are actually in a much different range than what would be used to destroy something on you. So there's very little chance whatsoever of it affecting the person in an adverse way. No, it's not. Each has their own attributes, both positive and negative. Each has their own specialties as what they can do best, such as the contact can work to a much lower frequency than our plasmas can. Our current version of the plasmas. It used to be our plasmas actually would go to a relatively low frequency, but the new generation has focused on much higher and much better targeting at the higher ranges, and we forfeited that a little bit. But as far as the application goes, the most expensive units are not necessarily the best units to use for a particular application, and very frequently it's the lesser expensive unit that is far more practical, cost-effective, and actually effective for a particular use. I, of course, have all units, and the unit I usually go to first is the simpler unit. But there are always cases when such as group settings, kids, animals, when the contact version is not practical, and plasma is almost a necessity. The plasmas also don't tether you to having to be near it. it is typically a household type coverage. Yes, and that occurs as a general rule, you can use either on either unit. The software is actually the same. And many people have both types of units and interchange the units, whatever is practical for them. But when it comes to some of the new work that we're doing that requires the ultra-low regions, the waveform is very different, and the method of application is very specific. And of course, this is a entirely new area that we're getting into. The mechanisms are completely different, but the frequencies themselves are in the very ultra-low regions, and in that case, the plasma wouldn't work at all. But the other unit is absolutely perfectly built for that. We get this question asked a lot. The answer is yes. It's not so much harm as it is you are robbing yourself of the ability to recover certain things. The body needs times of rest, and it will interfere with those rebuilding processes that are supposed to go on at night. Many people want to run it at night because that's when it's the most convenient for them, and that is the time we recommend you don't use it. It also will it will interfere with sleep unless they're running protocols specifically for sleep. But typically when they're going after something of a pathogenic origin, you need that time to eliminate, rebuild, repair. So the answers go actually both ways. There's nothing terribly harmful, but you're cheating yourself out of some very valuable time. That's a good question too. We get asked a lot. When we refer to the low frequencies, the public frequencies that have been out and available for years on the public lists typically are in the range up to about 15,000 hertz. For many, many years that was, and still in most places, that's the limit of the other manufacturers' capabilities. In fact, some that claim that their equipment really is doing very little above 7,000 hertz, which is atrocious. They rely on harmonics to get to higher frequencies utilizing a square wave, but in reality the frequencies used are under 20,000 hertz. Our frequencies on our lists, our equipment is capable of running far higher. In the lab we've gone as high as 980,000 hertz. Our equipment typically, as it is shipped now, easily does 500,000 hertz. So you see there's a drastic difference. Also, the actual mortal oscillatory rates of the pathogens is in these much higher regions. So we're able to allow full power directly into the pathogens, targeted pathogens, and deliver many more pulses in any given amount of time. Really good question. Our original intent was not for the production of colloidal silver. And in our research we realized that was excellent product to use. The colloidal silver is actually extremely small, super pure silver particles. Almost all pathogens have an enzyme that is used for respiration. Our cells don't have that, but the colloidal silver will, the silver particles will attach to that enzyme and literally kill, starve it of oxygen, and the pathogen typically dies within 5 minutes. So the colloidal silver itself is a natural antibiotic. This is all a side of a very nice benefit. We were looking for an imprintable media for instances for dogs and kids when they couldn't tolerate or wouldn't understand a mild electronic shock or a mild electronic signal, or wouldn't sit still long enough for it. So we wanted something that could be put in their water, such as a dog dish. So we would imprint the frequencies that we would use for some sort of parasite into, basically embed it into that new material, the colloidal silver. And that could be taken orally or used as a wash on the skin, or even cleaning something that they wanted to clean. But it also got the benefits of frequency from a homeopathic standpoint. In many ways, it is like a homeopathic, but a very, very specific, frequency specific. And the nature of building it and making it, it's very, very cheap to do. You don't have to go out and buy colloidal silver, which can be very expensive, at least in the States, and oftentimes of questionable value. I've really enjoyed being here. I've found the people here to be extremely enlightened. I've loved it here every trip that I've made. And I want to express my appreciation for having such a receptive audience. I've loved every person that I've talked to here. It's almost like being home, especially with being by the sea and growing up by the sea like this. It's like going home again. Thank you.